Good morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4. And I actually don't know because I don't have the cheat notes in front of me. But let's say 589 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. 100% Canadian. Always. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And not with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. And that's a bit explains our late start today. Unfortunately, Mr. Grizzly tried very, very, very hard up until the last minute, but just was not feeling well enough to do the show. So it took some time for some self-care, which we, of course, always advocate on the show, especially, since we're two. Pardon me, my voice is already going this morning. Since we're two, we can relay, right? And still make sure that we get a show to you. So we have the luxury of engaging in self-care when we need it, rather than having to push through. However, because Mr. Grizzly tried so hard to the last minute, I had to rejig the show on the fly because it was going to be clip heavy, because I was going to show you lots of clips of Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Mark Carney, responding to the Trump tariffs. So I will save some of that for when we have Mr. Grizzly with us, but we will touch upon the subject and then a couple of other things today as well. So it won't be as tariff heavy as expected, but we'll have that tomorrow for you if Mr. Grizzly is back with us and feeling well enough. But we still do have some stuff for you. So I thank you for your kindness and your patience today and your indulgence, because again, I'm flying solo and I don't always stick the landing. So hey, but you know what? You're here, we're here, and we're going to have a good time. And we do have a good show for you because I take lots of notes. So, I got stuff. I just had to rejig a few things and put it together for you. So we're going to have a fun time today. Kids and cubs, don't worry about it. Big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. And I'm seeing in the chat there are nice words from Mr. Grizzly. Thank you so much, kids and cubs. You guys are wonderful. I'm sure he's going to appreciate that very much. Let's see, today recording day is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. It's a great day here at the Beaver Lodge. It's not particularly cold, but a great day here. All right. How's my mental health doing? I guess I have to ask myself. Pretty good. Had a decent night's sleep. Had a nice night yesterday. I treated myself to a mini film festival. Plus, my beaver sweetie came home, which is always nice because that means cuddles. And well, we all know how much I like cuddles. So, I went to check out some of the Oscar-nominated films. Checked out The Substance, which I always wanted to see, but I'm not very much a gore fan, and it's labeled as a body horror. Wasn't that much gore until like around the end. For some reason, when they said throughout the movie, I kept on thinking, well, you said you used like so many liters of flake blood. Like, where is it? Because the part where I thought all the blood was going to come, it didn't really happen. Um, it got a little wildly weird at the end. Um, but okay, yeah, you go with it. It's the story, right? It's a bit of a weird story anyway. But really well done, visually very arresting. Um, Demi Moore eh, deserved all the plaudits she got. Um, yeah, the I can't imagine doing this in real life because, like, you're in state you're on the set or whatever, and you have all these people looking at you, and you have to act completely crazy insane and not care what you look like at all, like, in any way, shape, or form. Uh, I mean, you need, like, you can't have any self-consciousness whatsoever when you're doing that, right? And I'm sure that there might have been, like they have the makeup and all that kind of stuff, which helps. Um, but uh, it, it's tough to do. It's really tough to do to not care what you look like and be self-conscious in any way while you're doing that type of stuff. And for that type of movie and role to work, you have to really commit to the bit. So I mean, uh, you know, it's a It's a movie about a descent into madness, essentially, but it doubles as a body horror. So, which is kind of freaky. There's a couple of times I was like watching through because I thought it was going to get way worse than it did. So it was at a level that I can handle. Um, but really good movie, but not necessarily for everyone. I think you need to be in that genre. But if you like a good acting performance, wow. And Margaret Qualley as well. I was reading a review at one point, and it said like there's sort of like a porn-like quality to the acting uh, at some parts and the camera shots and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, I see, I get it. Yeah, style-wise, how that works, and it's a good debut. It's a good debut for her, and uh, it's also an exploration of selfishness as well, very interestingly. So it's good. It's really good, but it's in a style that you have to be able to um, consent to take. Let's say, but really good and visually great. Um, Stunning, and the acting all across the board in that film is fantastic. The screenplay is great. I think it won the Oscar for the screenplay, won deservedly for the makeup effects. It was good. It was very good. And Demi Moore won, I think, the Screen Actors Guild Award for the acting. She didn't win the Oscar, but she did win the Screen Actors Guild. And then I watched Nickel Boys, which is a also interesting, because a lot of it, well, all of it is pretty much in first person perspective. Uh, so what you see with the camera is really interesting, and it's also um, a series of snippets and moments of life that are sort of then put together, and then you get sort of an impression and a feel for the life, as it's done. But it's editing wise and whatnot, it requires a lot of work from the viewer to be able to get together. It is interesting. It's an interesting experiment. It was nominated for best film, and it was nominated for best screenplay as well. It's a very interesting story, and it's well done. And like I said, if you're someone who likes movies and like the technical side of movies, innovative editing and cameras angles and that type of stuff, um, this is a movie for you. It is a good story, uh, but it's just as you say, French d'étude, it's a study of two lives. So it's not like there's uh, a tons of driving action and that type of stuff. So it has a slow pace. Um, so it demands a lot of the viewer. It's a more challenging film, and probably a lot of people um, might not. I don't want to say not get it intellectually. You could, if you put it together, you can follow the story and all that kind of stuff. But um, maybe not get it. Maybe some people would think it's indulgent in that sense, in terms of a style exercise. But it was a good movie. They're both good movies, but it's not your. They're both not your standard fare. You have to do a little bit of work, or you have to have a bit of a stronger stomach. But yeah, I love those, and I'm looking to see a few more. I usually wait till the Oscars are about over and then go see a whole bunch of stuff. So got a couple more on the list. Anora and the Brutalist. Anora, of course, won 5 Oscars this year. I think best film, best screenplay. I think this one might have been an original screenplay, and I think The Substance was an adapted screenplay. Um, Best actress and best director. The guy, it was a very independent film. I think they made it for $6 million. So the person that directed it and did the screenplay and did the editing, and of course was part of the producers, ended up picking up 4 Oscars himself that night, and actually end up tied with Walt Disney for the person winning the most Oscars in one evening. So that's interesting. I think his name is Sean Baker. There is a Canadian connection to the movie in that the movie has a Canadian producer. Denis Villeneuve's, who was a Canadian director, Dune 2 picked up 2 awards, one for best sound, and the other, can't remember what the other one is actually. Visual effects, maybe, if I remember correctly. I can't remember, but that was a Canadian connection there. And in the best documentary feature, Sugarcane was nominated, and a lot of people had it as its pick. I had read an article from someone that said I watched all 50 Oscar-nominated movies or something like that. Here are the 6 that you must absolutely see, and Sugarcane was among the 6 there. That's a story about it was a Canadian entry, and it was a story about a documentary about residential schools um, and finding the finding of the discovery of the unmarked graves as of recent. But it lost to a film. Oh, I knew it off the top of my head. I can't remember it now. Um, Best documentary feature, but it dealt with what's going on in Israel and Palestine, um, about the destruction of homes and for settlers and all that kind of stuff. It's called No Other Land, and it's so it's a film about Palestinians fighting to protect their homes from demolition from Israel's military, and it's very interesting in that it didn't get a lot of distribution, so not a lot of people got to see it. So mostly it would have been um, Oscar voters when it gets nominated, they get their screeners. Um, but probably it would have been Oscar voters up until now that had the most chance to see this, and this will probably come out after. But it is notable because um, Yuval Abraham and Basal Adra, um, who did this film, I believe that is their names, if I'm not mistaken. One of them is Jewish, and one of them is Palestinian, and they worked together to make this film. Um, and that was one of the things about the Oscars this year, actually, kind of interesting. There seemed to be a lot of um, awards that went far and wide. Zoe Saldana won for Best Supporting Actress for Amelia Perez for a role she did mostly in Spanish, which was interesting. You had a lady from Brazil nominated in the Best Actress category for a foreign language film, which is again pretty rare at the Oscars. Um, the best animated film went to Flow, which is a movie, an animation film from Latvia. So there was a much more international flavor to the awards, and an independent film, truly independent film, won the best film Oscar and all that kind of stuff. So you know, very good all around. The Brutalist took 3 awards as well, and Adrian Brody won his second Oscar for Best Actor. Um, and in his acceptance speech, um, had a very important moment when he was talking about all of us, working together, because this was the second time that he received an Oscar for playing someone from a group that was persecuted. So, and there's a lot of stuff going on here at the moment. So, all in all, pretty good show, uh, and some Canadian content connection wins there. So, some stuff to be proud of. But yeah, good stuff. And I enjoyed the ceremony this year, and I enjoyed that I got to watch it this year because every now and then I miss it. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting films on the list, so I'm looking forward to go see that. I want to go see the Bob Dylan biopic as well. Um, uh, See, I can't remember the names of the films off the top of my head, and again, Nosferatu, which is usually not my fare, but Kit Hugh said it and said it was amazing, and again nominated for all kinds of Oscars, and Willem Dafoe is a very, very, very good actor, and he's in this film. So I'm challenging myself a little, but I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, a little Beaver Lodge Film Festival going on at the moment. And again, Kits and Cubs, if you have not seen it yet, I very, 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 very much recommend Conclave. Particularly if you like political thrillers, and if you like very, very good acting. By the way, I think the cast of Conclave won the Screen Actor Guild's award for the best ensemble. And I mean, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Ray Fiennes, Isabella Rossellini. I mean, come on. This is la creme de la creme here of acting. So treat yourself to that if you have the opportunity, if you have not yet. Okay. Started with some cultural stuff unexpectedly, the way the things wove into each other. But of course, as you know, Kits and Cubs, l'histoire du jour, the story of the day, is tariffs. So they came down as expected. Well, actually, I shouldn't say as expected because who knows if he would have changed his mind. And as expected, however, when they did come down, the stock markets did do some funny things. They didn't react kindly. Um, as you know, Donald Trump, or IQ 47, appears to believe that the stock market is the economy. So when the stock market doesn't like something he does, sometimes he pulls back. That's what kind of happened last time. The Dow had dropped 1,000 points pretty much yesterday at one point, rebounded a bit, closed a little higher at the end. But there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that. But it had dropped the day before by a lot. The stock market was actually having a good day the day before, and then there was a press conference where Trump was running his mouth again, and then mentioned something about the tariffs absolutely happened, and then you just see the stock just go boom. I think it was something like a 600-point drop or something instantly when he opened his mouth. If you actually see, I would show you the visual, but I don't have it here. But if you happen to be anywhere near your phone, just Google Dow chart, and you will see that at 3:25 p.m. the day before yesterday, the Dow Jones was at 43,082.86. That was at 3:25 p.m. And then he talked, and 30 minutes later, it was at 42,517.58. So that's a big drop. And it had closed at 43,194. So it dropped, yeah, about 600 points. Boom. So yeah, it wasn't, oh, sorry, my bad. I'm looking at the wrong day. It dropped worse than that. It dropped from 43,040 to, just looking at the number here, 42,386. Yeah, so it had dropped about 800 points. Then was going up again. It had got right back up to where it was before he opened his mouth the day before, and then plunged another by the close, another 600. Um, Same thing for the Nasdaq. It went down. The S&P, the Russell 2000. There's something called the VIX, the VIX, which is called the Fear and Greed Index, and it's set at extreme fear at the moment. And CNN had this great article out that said, 7 factors that you could look at to know whether or not, you know, bad things will happen. And 6 of the 7 factors were pointing to fear, and only one was pointing to greed at the moment. Um, so it's not looking good. So stock markets didn't really like what he had to say. China really didn't like what he had to say because we're talking about this, and one of the things that we forget along the way, because we're North American centric here, but Trump put an extra duty on China. Now there were already duties, so he added an extra 10. So I think there's now 20% at the moment on all Chinese goods. China has retaliated in certain ways as well. Like, for example, um, oh yeah, and the other thing, the going ahead with not allowing duty-free packages under $800, that has changed now as well. So that'll make it difficult for Temu and Shine, for example, to be able to um, do business in the United States. It'll make it more expensive for them to do that. Um, but this is happening at a time where, relative to us, but relative to itself, China's economy is considered weak. There was a time, um, maybe about a decade ago now, that China was growing pretty much consistently at almost 10% annually, if not more. And that's down now. So it's down to about 5%, which, over here in North America, we'd be like patting ourselves on the back and celebrating at 5% growth. But China has, very, very modern cities and still very, very, very rural agrarian parts. It's a big country and there's a lot of people. So it takes a lot of money to bring the current century to everyone all over. Um, so for them, 5% relative to past performance is considered weak. And China has announced a whole raft of stimulus measures and countermeasures to what's going on in the United States. So the United States Americans are going to be hit by retaliatory measures from China. Or I guess retaliatory. I'm not sure if China has the same policy as we do, as sort of matching but not escalating. Um, but whatever China is doing, that is having some pressure on the United States. In Canada, as of basically 12:01 in the morning, the day that the Trump tariffs came into effect, so did ours. Now ours are coming in two layers, or tranches, as people like to say. The first one, I think, is an immediate $30 billion so tariffs on $30 billion of goods, and then 21 days to add another $125 billion worth of tariffs to give companies chances to source elsewhere and all that type of stuff. Now, I would hazard to guess that given that this was the plan that was ready to go a month ago, when IQ 47 was considering this, that a lot of these businesses may have had an extra month to make those plans, hopefully started back then and didn't wait the 30 days to see if it was going to happen, but just started making the plans anyway. So if that is the case, those companies got a bonus 31 days and are getting an extra 21. If everybody had done it, might have been a good idea. Could have been a good idea, maybe, to not give those extra 21 to allow things to all hit now. But this is okay too, because um, with this being a start and then another layer coming in 21 days, because in the meantime, we have other Trump tariffs that are coming, or maybe right on the 12th, I think, is steel, aluminum, lumber, and all that kind of other stuff that he mentioned. And yesterday, he kind of put out this thing that said, somebody tell the word he uses before Trudeau to describe our prime minister, that if you retaliate, or like, how would he put it? He's talking about reciprocity, reciprocal. That's going to be his next thing, right? He's going to look at, he's having people study all the countries in the world and look at who's got tariffs on what on the United States, and he's going to establish those same tariffs. He says reciprocal. So he is calling what we are doing, right, something he'll need. So he's basically saying online here, Canadians and Trudeau, if you respond to our tariffs with something, we are going to consider that a tariff that we need to have one to match, a reciprocal tariff. It's like that's not how it works. The first person to start the trade war when there's a response does not get to say, "Oh, now I have to reciprocate." That's not reciprocation, that's escalation. What we did was reciprocal tariffs. You set them, we reciprocated. If you consider our reciprocation an escalation and therefore impose an extra 25% on everything because we're matching your 25%, this quickly becomes a game nobody wins, because we're going to have to do the same thing again. And at some point, you just look silly. Well, then, okay, it'll be 275% tariffs. Right? Come on. So, listen, is he nuts enough to go there out of spite because he doesn't like to be proven wrong? Yeah, probably. But that's a big but. Remember, stock market and how Trump loves the stock market. Something happened yesterday. I'm setting you up. I'm showing some leg here. Mexico has stated that they will be responding, I think, at some time on the weekend with what it is that they are going to do next. A lot of people are asking the question, oh, well, do you think that Mexico's like going behind Canada's back trying to negotiate something? Listen, Trump made it pretty clear, right? The day before, or whatever, said like, there's no more room for negotiation. I laughed because he was saying that as if we ever believed there was. We knew there was no room for no negotiation. The whole fentanyl thing was a pretext, and the prime minister said so in his comments yesterday, right? Um, so I doubt very much that Mexico has some master plan thing behind our back, proposal to sort of freeze us out type thing. There's been no evidence of that in this round, and there's never been any evidence of that really. In terms of the last round, I think there was some talk of it maybe like a little bit at the beginning, like everybody at first, and then quickly realized that the one thing that the United States and Trump in particular didn't like is that the dispute resolution mechanism is tripartite. It's not American versus somebody else. So the fact that Canada and Mexico can work together is actually a pretty good deal in this thing, and probably one of the elements of the deal that should absolutely, most definitely not be broken up, because the United States wants strictly bilateral trade agreements. That's one of the reasons he's trying to blow up Kuzma, because he wants them to be bilateral. Because if all the trade agreements are bilateral, it makes them easier to bully someone. There's no opportunity for 2 against 1. Mhm. All right. He likes the easy fights. He likes the easy fights. Donald Trump likes bend you over a barrel negotiations. So China's responding. Mexico's responding. We're responding. Europe is very much looking at this because basically Trump has already said you're next. So there's a lot of people looking at the Canadian response. Whatnot, can we do enough to hit them? Us alone, no, definitely not enough to take them down. And there is some wisdom about the talk of dollar for dollar tariffs simply because the U.S. economy is so much bigger that they have more dollars if we're doing dollar for dollars. So there's some debate out there about whether or not it's wise to say that. But dollar for dollar does sound way tougher. Um, and there's a bit of this that's some showmanship with Donald Trump, where you got to unfortunately be tough because that's what he responds to. So we're seeing a lot of that. Um, there are other measures as well that the prime minister is considering that are not tariff related. And some of the premiers have been getting in on it as well, right? Doug Ford talking about tearing up that Starlink deal again, and no bidding on government contracts, and the LCBO site was down at some point yesterday as they were taking all the American listings off it. Wab Canoe, as well in Manitoba, had mentioned that liquor was coming off the shelves. They're looking at other things. Danielle Smith, however, had an interesting take on things, I have to say, uh, because it happened in 2 stages here. The first one is her kind of realizing that the leopard wasn't just giving her playful kisses and it was tasting her face. Um, According to CTV, Alberta Premier Smith calls Trump's tariffs disappointing. This is Stephanie Ha from CTV. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who has been the most reluctant of Canada's premiers to directly criticize U.S. President Donald Trump, is calling his move to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods and 10% on Canadian energy, quote, disappointing. Ooh, such a strong rebuke, Danielle. Quote, to see this escalation is so disappointing, I forgot to do Danielle voice. To see this escalation is so disappointing, so damaging, initially to American consumers and American businesses who buy Canadian goods and raw materials, but then now with the counter tariffs, it's also going to be harmful to Canadian consumers. No one wins a tariff war, Smith said in an interview with CNBC on Tuesday. Smith also echoed similar comments to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Whoa, let me read that again. Smith also echoed similar comments to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Okay, blind squirrel finds a nut, saying Canada will challenge the tariffs at the World Trade Organization and through the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. And that is something that the Prime Minister did mention, filing all the grievances at the trade tribunals. But that stuff takes years, right? You got to do it, but it takes years. This is not going to be any instant relief here. Quote, and here's the doozy from Danielle Smith. I don't know why the president is behaving this way because it's illegal. Smith said, we're going to challenge it, and we would like to get back to that, negotiating some of the pressure points on that. We would like to get back to negotiating some of the pressure points on that. I don't know why the president is behaving this way, because it's illegal. Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? For people listening at home, I'm pretending like I'm tapping on Danielle Smith's brain. Hello? 1, 2, testing. Did the 34 felony convictions, did you miss those? Did you miss January 6th? Did you miss E. Jean Carroll? Did you miss Trump Foundation? Like, civilly and criminally, he has been found guilty several times. Then there were all the other cases in court that had been started, but then dismissed because, he won his get out of jail free card. But all those charges there that were going to court, right? And then there was a whole special counsel thing. There was also the 2 impeachments. But you do not understand why this president, it's surprising to you that this president would behave in an illegal way, that something being illegal would somehow prevent him from doing something. And it's incomprehensible to you that this particular president would refuse to be bound by the law this time. Really? That's what you're gonna go with? Okay. Uh, wow. I'm seeing here the kits here. I roared when I read that. It says kid playing with 3D cats. W. Smith is totally out of it. Linda M. Oh my, a felon did something illegal. Pardon me, kids. I'm sorry. I'm laughing and coughing at the. Oh my word! I laughed so hard I made myself cough. Oh my word! Uh, oh my god! Is she? Wow! I'm. If there's ever an argument for you, UCP caucus, to throw her overboard, really? She could not predict that a one-man crime spree would break the law, as he is violating his own word on the best trade agreement the United States ever signed, according to him, by some idiot, according to him, a few years later, to declare tariffs, which is illegal. And he's done that before when we had a trade deal, when we had NAFTA, declare tariffs that were illegal. You're really surprised he would do something illegal, especially now that he's king. Really? Oh my god. UCP. The call's coming from inside the house, man. The call's coming from inside the house. You got one that's a couple of sandwiches short of a picnic. Come on, man. It's like, geez. Oh my word. Danielle Smith. My dogs are goth are going, Linda. You made Douglas cry with laughter. Yeah, indeed. Oh my god. Yeah, a little aside, by the way, I'm seeing in the chat. I hope your birthday was wonderful, Kit Elaine. Wow. But ever, ever the team player, Danielle Smith, because you need to remember that when Trump mused aloud about the steel and aluminum tariffs, right? François Legault was like, well, yeah, of course. We're going to hit back. And steel and aluminum is very, very, very big in Quebec. Almost like auto manufacturing is big in Ontario, and oil and gas is big in Alberta. But according to Canadian press, even though Danielle Smith yesterday seemed to realize that she betrayed her country for ultimately nothing, because the tariff still came on, she's not all the way there yet. Because according to Canadian press, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith lashed out Tuesday as hefty sweeping U.S. tariffs kicked in on Canadian goods, but she reiterated she won't retaliate by hiking levies on oil and gas heading south of the border. Quote, "This policy is both foolish and a failure in every regard," Smith said in a statement. She called the tariffs an unjustifiable attack and a clear breach of the trade agreement that the U.S. President Donald Trump signed in his first term in the White House. Earlier Tuesday, Trump's long-promised executive order took effect, hitting Canada and Mexico with 25% across-the-board tariffs with a 10% levy on Canadian energy. Canada then announced retaliatory tariffs on $155 billion worth of American goods, with $30 billion being applied immediately. Other provinces announced they are pulling American liquor from government store shelves. Some are banning U.S. businesses from bidding on provincial contracts. Smith said she and her United Conservative government supports the federal government response and will announce its own response plan Wednesday. But the response obviously will not have anything touching her dear, precious oil and gas. Quote, "These tariffs will hurt the American people, driving up costs for fuel." Well, no, not if you can help it. Well, 10%, I guess. Fuel, food, vehicles, housing, and many other products. They will also cost hundreds of thousands of American and Canadian jobs, she said. She reiterated that Canada must work to tear down provincial trade barriers, build pipelines, and beef up military spending, and strengthen trade ties with other allies. Speaking to American network CNBC, Smith said the province would not impose counter tariffs on energy exports, calling it an essential product for American consumers and businesses. Her government has advocated for increasing energy exports to the U.S., a country whose word means nothing, especially when it signs its name on a deal now. But sure, let's do more trade and sell more. But Smith said, especially to a guy who's known to not pay his bills. Just saying. Her government has advocated for increasing energy exports to the U.S., but Smith said Alberta would have to look to other markets if the U.S. tariffs persist. Gee, it's a good thing Trudeau built you a pipeline, eh? So that you have that option, eh? Okay. Her government has I would love to sell double the amount that we are right now to the United States. Well, of course you would. That would require much more effort on your part now, would it? Much easier to just double what we're already selling to the United States at a deep discount rather than trying to sell more internationally. Especially now that we need to diversify. But okay. Now producers need to look at how they can sell more out of the West Coast, out of the East Coast, and out of the North, she said. Quote, "If the Americans don't want our products, the rest of the world does." Smith lobbied hard in the weeks preceding the tariffs to try to head them off. She traveled to Washington for Trump's inauguration and visited his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Yes, Mrs. Smith went to Washington. Wasn't as good as the movie, though. She has said she would continue to push for unencumbered trade between the two countries. She told CNBC that addressing the flow of illicit fentanyl into the U.S., which Trump has said is the impetus for the tariffs, is not a one-way street. Quote, "We are not the root of a lot of the problem," she said, pointing to a spillover of drugs coming into Canada for the U.S. Whoa, Danielle. Jeez. Quote, as issues have been raised, we've been solving them, and yet new issues keep popping up, which suggests that we've got a president that doesn't actually want a deal. That's the problem. But I want to send more. I want to double the amount of oil I sell to them. See how these things don't go together? She's actually getting to the point where she's saying some of the right things, but she's not. She's still, yeah, but everybody else in Canada has to sacrifice something first. That's my way of being on Team Canada. I'm on Team Canada so long as it doesn't cost me. And that's not being on Team Canada. Trump offered a month-long reprieve on tariffs after Ottawa announced its plan to increase border security with more than $1 billion in spending and the appointment of a special fentanyl commissioner. Alberta put an extra $29 million into border security. Alberta's latest budget, introduced last week, earmarks $4 billion in part to deal with the expected economic fallout of the tariffs. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi said Smith's approach to diplomacy failed, and he criticized the premier for waiting until now to craft a plan to deal with the trade war she should have been prepared for. Quote, she thought her balls and parties tour of balls and parties. I love that. She thought her balls and parties tour of Mar-a-Lago and Washington, D.C. would get Albertans a reprieve from devastating tariffs that will wreak havoc on our jobs, our industries, and our way of life, he said in a statement. And she was wrong, is the implication there in that statement. So Danielle Smith, ever the team player. In this thing going on. Jagmeet Singh had a few things to say with regard to what is going on. And he's calling for Parliament to be recalled again to pass emergency legislation to support Canadians at risk of losing their jobs due to cross-border standoff. He's going to be addressing Canadians today around 10 a.m. To explain how he and his party believe Canada should respond to the threat posed by Trump's tariffs. When he hits the stage at a Canadian Union of Public Employees conference on building strong locals, which got underway in Montreal earlier this week and wraps up tomorrow. This is according here to our friends at iPolitics. Again, if Mr. Singh wants Parliament to be recalled, he also has to commit to making Parliament work if he wants to do this. Now, this is from iPolitics, Marco Vigliotti. In the face of sweeping tariffs from the U.S., NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says Parliament must be recalled to pass a support bill to help Canadians who could potentially lose their jobs or livelihoods. Singh said Tuesday that legislation needs to be passed immediately to get financial support to impacted workers and called for the government to launch a, quote, Build Canadian, Buy Canadian program to create jobs. But the NDP leader did not indicate how far his party is willing to go to prop up the minority Liberals. Once Parliament is recalled, there will need to be a new speech from the throne, which traditionally triggers a 6-day debate and at least one vote, which is automatically designated a question of confidence. Quote, in times of crisis, partisanship can and must take a backseat to the national interest, Singh wrote in a letter to the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his fellow opposition leaders. Quote, Canadians expect us to put the country before our respective parties. Let's work together to quickly deliver a comprehensive package of measures that would support workers and Canadians. Now, my editorial aside here, if Jagmeet Singh is saying in times of crisis, partisanship can and must take a backseat to the national interest, I would assume that that statement is a two-way street. I would assume that this is not a statement from an opposition party leader to the Prime Minister saying, you need to put partisanship aside, but I will keep my partisanship going. Again, kits and cubs, if you are making these grand statements, but you are not also willing to add And therefore, in order to achieve this, even though I said I would bring down the government at the first opportunity, I commit now to not vote down government on the speeches for the throne so that we can start work on getting those bills. And so long as good faith work is being done on those bills, I will not take down the government. Now, if the government was being sneaky, they'd pass their budget before the bill. Or they'd put these measures in a budget so that you're not having two votes on money matters. That would probably make the NDP object because they would probably want this bill to pass first and then be able to still have the budget to take the government down if they needed to or wanted to. But the government would have some leverage in this case because it would be the NDP who would say, listen, it's budget time anyway. So we're just doing it all in one. And I don't think most Canadians would be interested in the process question, especially as prices are going up and people are losing jobs. Right? So I don't think the NDP has a winning thing here unless they're willing to commit. And it does not seem that that's the case. Now, again, saying did not propose specific policy measures, but called for, quote, emergency support for affected workers. Okay, this is not helpful. Running in front of a mic and saying, we need, but not coming with specifics or a how or commitment to actually be all in and helping making that happen. You're just wasting time. You're just wasting time. Singh did not propose specific policy measures, but called for emergency support for affected workers and industries investments to create, quote, good union jobs and, quote, unanimous support for retaliatory tariffs. Quote, I understand that we are all preparing for an election to be called soon, he said, but these steps need to be taken immediately prior to an election. Otherwise, we are leaving Canadians vulnerable to the impacts of tariffs to suffer for months as an election is held and a new government is chosen. And once again, I say there's a series of bills here. If they're going to do this type of measure, there are things that Justice Marie-Josée Hogg asked for in the Foreign Interference Inquiry Report that probably should be implemented before the next election, some of them which require legislation. That could be voted on. There's the bill to make it more easy to vote early, increase accessibility. That's waiting. That needs to pass. There's the first bill co-written between the Crown and Indigenous communities. I believe, if I remember correctly, having to do with water and water safety. That's waiting to be passed. You can take all of those bills and make a small little agenda and promise to work on them. That would definitely be putting partisanship aside for the interest of the country. There's a path still for Mr. Singh if he wishes to propose it. It can't just seem to go all in. Should Parliament be recalled, MPs must also pass legislation approving a swath of new government spending, known collectively as the estimates, by March 26th, triggering another confidence vote. Without a supply bill passing, government departments can't spend new money, including aid to workers and businesses impacted by U.S. tariffs. Those 25% tariffs on most Canadian goods and a lower 10% levy on energy products are set to go into effect on Tuesday. Trudeau has promised to respond with $155 billion into retaliatory tariffs, a measure Singh said he supports. But the federal Liberals will elect a new leader on March 9th who is expected to quickly take over as prime minister. That means pursuing an aid package will be likely a decision for the new leader. And on this front, the prime minister was asked during the press conference how long after. And he said that would depend as well on the new incoming leader because, there is a transition to prepare and there's a certain number of days that are required for that to happen. He doesn't suspect it would be very long, but, there is a bit of a transition to prepare. When asked if he would recall Parliament before March 24th to pass an aid package, Mark Carney's campaign said only that any decision would be made in the best interests of Canadians. Quote, Chrystia Freeland's campaign responded that she would fight for Canadians, including in Parliament, where she sits in the House of Commons. Chrystia Freeland has been making a point of pointing out that since she has a seat, she could get to work right away. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wouldn't commit to propping up the Liberals to pass any aid legislation. He never does, saying only that the House isn't sitting because Prime Minister Trudeau opted to prorogue back in January to allow Liberals time to regroup. But of course, my editorial addition, never adding that since the second week of the return of Parliament in September, not one bill except for the GST holiday has been passed because the Conservatives have been proactively blocking everything with the filibuster, and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP have been passively, aggressively acquiescing to allowing that to happen by not voting to lift the filibuster for any measure other than the GST holiday. Since the second week, the House came back in September. Nothing in October, nothing in November, nothing in December. But Pierre Poilievre wants you to believe, oh, if only the House were open, we can do all these things that he too has not committed to support or allowing the House to operate for it to pass. The opposition leaders here are continuing to be extremely disingenuous with their calls. So that's Mr. Singh. Interesting enough, Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedno, because I think we mentioned it on the show, but Jonathan Pedno had to step away for a while and has returned as the co-leader. So the Green Party is now back to its co-leader status. They're going to present a pre-election pitch for greater cooperation among progressive parties to prevent conservative gains resulting from vote splitting today at 11 a.m. So this should be very interesting. Can't wait to hear what they have to say. On a related note, in Ontario, I believe it is an NDP MPP, Catherine Fife, has come out and said that maybe we should work on something, Liberals and NDP, in order to have a deal. Which had me throwing things at my computer and saying, too late. I mean, clearly, it's never too late in the sense that there are other elections in Canada to come. And, it could be handy to have such an agreement, but it's like we just had an election, and there were so many of us that were asking and begging for this to happen, and it didn't. And now that we have a third Doug Ford majority and two small opposition parties, fortunately, both of them with official party status now, which should help. But now you want to talk about collaborating. It is frustrating. It is extremely frustrating. However, these types of talks are positive. Hopefully, there's something that they will be able to figure out on this topic. But yeah, that's something that we really, 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 really would have loved for you to do like 3 or 4 months ago. So this is from the Waterloo Region Record. She represents an electoral district in that area. This is by Jeff Outhit. Safely re-elected to a fifth term in Waterloo, New Democrat MPP Catherine Fife will meet soon with top Liberal organizer Catherine McGarry for what could be a game-changing conversation. The topic, how two opposition parties that see themselves on the centre and on the left can stop splitting votes and work together to prevent the Doug Ford government from winning another Ontario election. Quote, the first step is to start the conversations and not preclude the outcomes. I'm willing to move into that space with some honesty and some integrity to potentially move electoral reform, Fife said. She declined to elaborate on what electoral reform would look like. Does she want opposition parties to merge? Does she want parties to jointly endorse candidates with the best chances of winning to streamline voter options? Quote, this is what I'll say. I'm not interested in running in another election against other progressives when we are competing with each other, which only benefits progressive conservative parties, she said. Fife was re-elected Thursday when the Ford government won its third straight majority since 2018. McGarry, a former Cambridge mayor, is president of the Ontario Liberal Party and a former Liberal cabinet minister. It's worth a discussion, McGarry said. She's heard from others who are also concerned the progressive vote is being split on the left side. I think at this time, everything can be on the table as we look at the democracy that we have here in Ontario and in Canada, McGarry said. She cautions there are hurdles. For one, the feelings of party leaders are unclear. Here's another hurdle. Parties have a financial incentive to compete in all 124 ridings because even where a candidate has no chance of winning, because parties receive a subsidy from Elections Ontario for every vote received. Unofficial results show Liberal and New Democrat candidates collectively won 2.4 million votes Thursday, outpacing Progressive Conservative candidates at 2.2 million votes. This is not reflected in the provincial legislature, where seats go to whoever gets the most votes. The Ford government took 80 seats winning or leading. The Liberals and New Democrats collectively took 41 seats winning or leading. Vote splitting erupted as a concern when Fife campaigned for re-election. Green Party candidate Shafaza Ismail asked her supporters to vote for Fife instead to help prevent what she feared would be a win by Progressive Conservative candidate Peter Turkington. Quote, she did shine a light on how broken the electoral system is, and for that I am very thankful, Fife said before ballots were counted. Fife won half the vote in a riding, almost doubling Turkington, who finished second with 27%. Ismail finished a distant fourth with 4% of ballots cast. Conservative parties gain an edge in provincial and federal elections when opposition votes are split among Liberals and Democrats, pollsters say. Quote, I really do think that we could be having a conversation going forward about whether or not there's really a need for two parties on the progressive side of the political agenda, Darrell Bricker, chief executive of Ipsos Public Affairs, told a forum in February at Wilfrid Laurier University. Quote, it's always healthy for different parties to talk about how we can work together, said John Malloy, a former Liberal cabinet minister who represented Kitchener Centre. But Malloy is skeptical about an underlying premise that Liberals and New Democrats are the same. Quote, we're not at all the same party, said Malloy, who served as a House leader for a minority Liberal government and worked closely with New Democrats. Quote, I have a lot of respect for the NDP, but I saw a very different approach to government, a different worldview, a different approach to politics. I don't necessarily see this as progressives against Doug Ford. I see different parties that stand for different things. A different kind of electoral reform would involve changing the winner-takes-all parliamentary tradition by assigning legislative seats proportionally after elections are held. Governments and the public have yet to buy into such a change, which would require legislation. Another electoral reform that's often proposed is to switch to ranked ballots, allowing voters to assign preferences. McGarry does not expect Ford government to bring any legislation to change the voting system, quote, because it works for them, clearly, 3 times in a row. So yeah, interesting that Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedno will be proposing something about that that could be used in this coming election, hopefully. So we'll hear what they have to say, but that should be an interesting stop this morning. So these are these responses to sort of what's going on at the moment. The Green response doesn't seem like a response to the tariffs directly, but if the Green policy is that a conservative government for the next 4 years alongside a Trump government is probably the worst thing possible, then wanting to collaborate on this incoming election or come to an agreement is an indirect response to it. So that's the NDP and the Greens. We get to the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre had another press conference yesterday, and once again, He just cannot meet the moment. He started off pretty well for him. For him, he started off pretty well. Um, but he can't help himself. He just can't help himself. To me, this press conference should be the space where he sinks himself for good. But of course, people have to see it, right? Uh, but he completely fails the assignment. On the day that after that the tariffs come down, um, you're expected to go to a microphone and talk on behalf of Canada. You know, show resistance, show determination, highlight solidarity, and keep it to that. And yesterday we had a study in contrast. If you're looking at Pierre Poilievre and the Prime Minister, and when I'm able to show you the clips tomorrow, you will see that. But this will give you an idea. He starts well, but maybe not even 2 minutes in, starts to go partisan, reminding us again, like the abusive boyfriend he is, how it is that we are broken and worthless. Even though counter tariffs are already in place, rather than signing on to Team Canada, he's proposing his plan. Again, starting with priorities for counter tariffs that are already the priorities that are guiding the counter tariffs that came into place at 12:01 a.m. on the day that the US tariffs came into effect. Because that response was ready to go a month ago. I don't know if Pierre was asleep the whole last month. But, we need to first hurt things that we can't, things that we make ourselves and things we can source elsewhere. Yeah, again, that's people have been saying this like for 2, 3 months. That's the standard. This is not a plan. This is you just recycling or stating aloud the obvious. And I note again that you were the last one to do it. So, and I will also note that should you become prime minister, by the time you become prime minister, that will already have been done by other people. So it's not something that you are going to do or can do. You could sit there and say, we need to do it. Yeah, people are on that already, Pierre. Stop saying it like it hasn't been done or it's not being done. Those are the principles that are guiding our response already. You just lifted them and claiming them they're yours and that you just thought of it now. You didn't. That's not you. And then his solutions are wrong. He says that money raised from counter tariffs should not first be going, well, he is saying, that the money raised from tariffs should be going to some generalized tax cut to help all Canadians. Because with a small portion of it going to people affected directly by the tariffs. And that none of it should be going to like general revenues for government pet projects. That's precisely the wrong solution. And when Mark Carney was talking yesterday, Mark Carney was saying money raised from counter tariffs should not first be going to generalized tax cuts. They should be going to ensure that the industries and the workers directly affected are kept whole. If there is going to be additional money for the rest of Canada, that needs to come from a separate envelope. So if you are going to give tax cuts to Canadians as a whole to help them deal with tariffs, that has to come from a separate budgetary envelope completely than the money we're going to raise by matching tariffs. Two pools of money. Pierre wants to use that one pool of money to do both things. So Pierre is already telegraphing how it is that he is going to give you, if you are affected by this directly, if you happen to be working in auto manufacturing, if you happen to be working in steel and aluminum and all that kind of stuff, he's already telegraphing how it is he is going to give you less because all those counter tariffs, he's going to take it And he's going to give a generalized tax cut to everyone. He's going to dilute the pool of money to everyone because everyone's affected by tariffs, right? But in your particular industry, if you need an infusion cash to keep it whole, if you need to go on a CERB-like stipend until this is done, how do you do that if he's taken that money and given everybody across Canada a $200 tax cut? Where's that money for you? He's already telegraphing how he's going to screw you. A tax cut from everyone. That's like a chicken in every pot, right? A tax cut in every wallet. But it does mean that those hardest hit will not get the amount of support they need if he's not willing to commit more money. And we know from past behavior, he already believes that we got too much during COVID, and he is the party that says that those are big social programs, and we don't believe in that. So those are the first 2 points of his plan. He released a 7-point plan. When he gets to point 3, you realize that his plan to do things that started to be done over a month ago and will already be done long before he could ever assume the position of prime minister, should people elect him to it. Well, elect the party, Conservative Party, the government, because we don't elect anybody to the position of prime minister. After that, his solution is a tax cut plus another tax cut. So we need a tax cut to respond to the tariffs. And then we need, once again, his big, bold, patriotic middle-class tax cut on top of that. So promise to do things that would already be done way before you'd ever have a chance to be prime minister, a tax cut, and then another tax cut. Wow, sheer brilliance. And after those 2 tax cuts, guess what he's got for you? More tax cuts. The carbon tax and the capital gains tax. It's like a tax cut is to a conservative like Windex is to the father in my big fat great wedding. It's the solution to everything. Just 4 tax cuts. Do something that's already been done in 4 tax cuts. 2 of those tax cuts, by the way, the carbon one and the capital gains one, are both being ditched by any of the Liberal candidates. So you don't have to vote for Pierre to get those 2. So, but 4 tax cuts. Now, this is fabulous policy for those among us who don't make enough money to pay enough taxes to be able to maximize the benefit of all these tax cuts. He got nothing for you, though, in his plan, because you don't matter. Then, so by now you're wondering, but hey, if Conservatives are cutting all those taxes, with what money is Pierre going to keep Canadians hit by tariffs in the industries which they work whole, while simultaneously balancing the budget and boosting our defense spending to 2% of GDP, or maybe even more? If you're asking yourself that, you might be paying attention. If he's cutting all those taxes and he's distributing the counter tariff money for tax cuts, with what money is he going to help the industries and the workers? And then with what money is he going to do the rest of the stuff that he needs to do as prime minister for our daily lives? All he's proposing is cutting government revenues. And handing out tax cuts. That's all he's got. Nothing else. And then at that point, he starts veering off to some of the stuff that he said on Sunday that we showed you the other day, but that nobody got to hear because CBC News didn't cut away from its programming to show his live thing on Sunday. By the way, Some kit accurately had pointed out I had two in my analysis, but I forgot to mention it when I talked about it. You will notice also in that press conference that even though he came to smear Carney on Brookfield, not one journalist was interested in Carney or asked him a question about Brookfield. Same thing happened after this press conference too, by the way. Just whatever it is that he put out against Carney, no journalist is biting at the moment. Then all of a sudden he refers to World War II as that war. Just that war. It was just weird. It was like a needle on a record. I just, no, what? And then, again, as I mentioned before, still talking as if he would have allowed laws to change, as if Parliament was still operating. So, he's saying at the same time, Parliament should be operating so that we can pass laws that are needed at this time, and I will not commit to actually doing a damn thing to even entertain the concepts of passing those laws should Parliament be open. No making sensey. And it's some next level gaslighting as well, right? And the rest of the press conference is literally pretty much word for word a segment of his speech delivered on Sunday. Because he had to make sure we heard it because it didn't get carried live. CBC didn't cut away from Rosemary Barton live. They just showed him on a box on the side, and then at one point the box just disappeared. It's like, yeah, he's talking again. I love it. So, yeah. In a moment, where you would expect the President of the United States just declared an economic war on Canada through tariffs. This is a time to stand together and whatnot. It's like, he still find time to criticize the economy, to criticize the government, and then to start talking about repealing C-69 and all his usual stump speech stuff. He couldn't take the stump speech out of the response. He couldn't take the I hate Trudeau out of his invective. Even for 8 minutes. On a big day. He can't read the room. He can't meet a moment. He just can't help himself. It was embarrassing. And the worst part is the delivery was terrible, particularly at the beginning. And then the entire part at the end, you would think that given that was his second time delivering the exact same words, almost word for word in front of cameras and mic for a national audience, that he would have been better at it. But yeah. Not impressive. Then we have the Prime Minister, who, once again, showed us statesmanship, showed us what we have willingly chosen to let go. Responding as one would expect. Strength, determination, solidarity, praise for the Canadian people in the ways that they have banded together. Clear resolution, delivered in a manner that it makes it very, very clear. I am not stuttering when I'm saying this. And maybe even letting loose a little, given that he knows he only has a couple of days left. But really, yeah, maybe letting loose. He literally said something like, directly to Donald Trump, like, "You're a smart man, but this is a dumb move." which is pretty blunt. It's not untrue in any way, shape, or form, but blunt. Rather blunt, actually. According to Davis Legree at iPolitics, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau ripped U.S. President Donald Trump for introducing sweeping levies on Canadian goods and instigating a trade war with its closest historical ally as the federal government moves forward with planned retaliatory tariffs. Quote, "Let me be crystal clear. There is absolutely no justification or need whatsoever for these tariffs," said Trudeau during a press conference on Parliament Hill. "They've chosen to launch a trade war that will first and foremost harm American families." After months of threats, Trump officially implemented a 25% blanket tariff on Canadian products, as well as a 10% levy on Canadian energy on Tuesday morning. Now, one of the things that, before go any further, that Trudeau said is because you have to understand how you start these things really, really, really matter, right? Because you're setting a tone. And I want to be just read to you what it is that the Prime Minister said to start it off. Because I put it, what comes next then clearly makes more sense, right? When you're hearing a quote, it's taken from the speech at some point in the speech, and there's what comes before, what comes after, and there's a bit of a setup. So the Prime Minister basically came up to the podium and said, "So today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense." That was the opening. So the Prime Minister had come to play. Make no bones about that. In response, the Liberal government took several actions aimed at improving border security, culminating a new $1.3 billion border plan unveiled in December. Government data suggested these policy measures have helped further limit the already insignificant amount of fentanyl flowing into the U.S. from Canada. And from what I heard, I believe it was the actual person named as the fentanyl czar, who's extremely well-spoken and comes across as extremely credible. Canada, when they were saying that it was like 1% of all fentanyl entering the United States was entering from the Canada border into the United States, Canada's already cut that down by 97% already since these measures have been put into place. And that wasn't good enough. That wasn't enough to satisfy the president. Right? As such, Trudeau told reporters that Trump's reasoning for the tariffs is bogus. He actually used the word bogus. Quote, "These tariffs are not specifically about fentanyl, even though that is the legal justification he must use," said Trudeau. "We did everything promised and we stuck to our word. The one thing Trump has said repeatedly that he wants to, the one thing," and this is where the Prime Minister really dropped the bomb. "The one thing Trump has said repeatedly that he wants to see is a total collapse of the Canadian economy because that will make it easier to annex us." Trudeau said he had hoped that Trump's constant talk of tariffs was just a clever negotiating ploy, but in fact, the U.S. administration has launched a full-blown trade war on its largest partner. And of course, the response in terms of the $155 billion in tariffs are spoken of here. But immediately impacted products, I think, actually, don't quote me on this one if it's immediately, but impacted products will include fruit and vegetables, beef, dairy, electronics, steel and aluminum, as well as automotive vehicles. It's the same retaliation threatened by Canada last month, so it shouldn't be a surprise here to anyone. Our tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. tariffs are withdrawn, and not a moment sooner, said Trudeau. Should these tariffs not cease, we are in active and in ongoing discussions with provinces and territories to pursue several non-tariff measures. Now, you have to understand that, again, when we talk about the Prime Minister, he's not only the Prime Minister of Canada, he is still the dean of all the global advanced democracies, particularly more progressive nations, and countries that still adhere to the rules-based order. This message is also for them. The speech is also for them. An intended audience for the speech is also them. So the making it clear to the world and the country that Trump is trying to provoke a total collapse of the Canadian economy in order to make it easier to annex us is key. It's important for our allies to know that that's our position. Trudeau said pulling government contracts with American companies could be on the table if tariffs persist, though he did not mention shutting off Canadian energy exports as been suggested by Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The federal government plans to file dispute resolution claims at the World Trade Organization and under the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Agreement, which Trump himself negotiated during his first term to succeed the North American Free Trade Agreement. Trudeau also said the government will look at expanding employment insurance benefits and providing direct supports to businesses impacted by the tariffs. No matter how long this lasts, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you, he said. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. Trudeau is set to speak with Canada's premiers yesterday, while he said he hadn't spoken to Trump over the last few days. Following the federal government's announcement, Trump made a post on social media calling the Prime Minister Governor Trudeau, a reference to the president's repeated threat to annex Canada, and saying, quote, when Trudeau puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. It makes no sense. The trade dispute also comes against the backdrop of a Liberal leadership race, which will determine who succeeds Trudeau as Canada's Prime Minister. Registered Liberals will vote to select the party's next leader on March 9th, though Trudeau said the transition's timeline will depend on his deliberations with the eventual winner. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, the leadership's race front-runner, issued a statement last night that called the tariffs, quote, an unjustified direct attack on Canadian workers, families, and businesses. Quote, the unpredictability of U.S. trade policy underscores the imperative of Canada using every tool at our disposal to build the strongest economy in the G7, said Carney. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are united and determined. In trade, as in hockey, we will win. Meanwhile, former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, often viewed as Carney's main rival, released a statement calling for dollar-for-dollar retaliation and a ban on Tesla, X, formerly Twitter, Starlink, and SpaceX, all of which are owned by a Trump advisor, Elon Musk, from receiving, quote, any current or future federal procurement subsidies or incentives. This is an urgent national priority, said Freeland. We must ensure tariffs are lifted swiftly and protect our economy from Trump's self-mutilating attack on North American prosperity. So, Prime Minister pulled absolutely no punches. Like I said it was dumb. And here's the thing. The Prime Minister saying it was dumb is not some flight of fancy. On January 31st, when the first set of tariffs were to come in, before we got that 30-day reprieve, well-noted liberal rag, the Wall Street Journal, I'll allow you to snicker for a bit, okay, posted an editorial, and this was from their editorial board, the dumbest trade war in history. How's that? President Trump will fire his first tariff salvo on Saturday against those notorious American adversaries, Mexico and Canada. They'll get hit with a 25% border tax, while China, a real adversary, will endure 10%. This reminds us of all the old Bernard Lewis joke that it's risky to be America's enemy, but it can be fatal to be its friend. Leaving China aside, Mr. Trump's justification for this economic assault on their neighbor makes no sense. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says they've, quote, enabled illegal drugs to pour into America, but drugs have flown into the U.S. for decades and will continue to do so as long as Americans keep using them. Neither country can stop it. Drugs may be an excuse since Mr. Trump has made clear he likes tariffs for their own sake. Quote, "We don't need the products that they have," Mr. Trump said on Thursday. Quote, "We have all the oil you need. We have all the trees you need," meaning the lumber. Mr. Trump sometimes sounds as if the U.S. shouldn't import anything at all, that America can be a perfectly closed economy making everything at home. This is called autarky, 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 and it isn't the world we live in or one that we should want to live in, as Mr. Trump may soon find out. Take the U.S. auto industry, which is really a North American industry because supply chains in the three countries are highly integrated. In 2024, Canada supplied almost 13% of U.S. imports of auto parts and Mexico nearly 42%. Industry experts say a vehicle made on the continent goes back and forth across borders a half dozen times or more as companies source components and add value in the most cost-effective ways. And everyone benefits. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative says that in 2023, the industry added more than $809 billion to the U.S. economy, or about 11.2% of total U.S. manufacturing output, supporting, quote, 9.7 million direct and indirect U.S. jobs. In 2022, the U.S. exported $75.4 billion in vehicles and parts to Canada and Mexico. That number jumped 14% in 2023 to $86.2 billion, according to the American Automotive Policy Council. American car makers would be much less competitive without this trade. Regional integration is now an industry-wide manufacturing strategy, also employed in Japan, Korea, and Europe, aimed at using a variety of high-skilled and low-cost labor markets to source components, software, and assembly. The result has been that U.S. industrial capacity in autos has grown alongside an increase in imported motor vehicles, engines, and parts. From 1995 to 2019, imports of autos, engines, and parts rose 169%, while U.S. industrial capacity in autos, engines, and parts rose 71%. As the Cato Institute's Scott Lincecum puts it, that's the first time I've seen that last name, so it took me a while to register it. As the Cato Institute's Scott Lincecum puts it, the data show that, quote, as imports go up, U.S. production goes up. Thousands of good-paying auto jobs in Texas, Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan owe their competitiveness to this ecosystem, relying heavily on suppliers in Mexico and Canada. Also, I believe Kentucky has a burgeoning auto assembly manufacturing industry happening. Tariffs will also cause mayhem in the cross-border trade in farm goods. In fiscal 2024, Mexican food exports made up about 23% of total U.S. agricultural imports, while Canada supplied some 20%. Many top U.S. growers have moved to Mexico because limits on legal immigration have made it hard to find workers in the U.S. Mexico now supplies 90% of avocados sold in the U.S. Is Mr. Trump now an avocado nationalist? Then there's the prospect of retaliation, which Canada and Mexico have shown they know how to do for maximum political impact. In 2009, the Obama administration and congressional Democrats ended a pilot program that allowed Mexican long-haul truckers into the U.S., as stipulated in NAFTA. Mexico responded with targeted retaliation on non-U.S. goods to pressure industries in key congressional districts. These include California grapes and wine, Oregon Christmas trees, and cherries, jams, and jellies from Ohio and North Dakota soy. When Mr. Trump imposed steel and aluminum tariffs in 2018, Mexico got results using the same tactic, putting tariffs on steel, pork products, fresh cheese, and bourbon. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has promised to respond to U.S. tariffs on a dollar-for-dollar basis. Canada could suffer a larger GDP hit since its economy is so much smaller, but American consumers will feel the bite of higher costs for some goods. None of this is supposed to happen under the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement that Mr. Trump negotiated and signed in his first term. The U.S. willingness to ignore its treaty obligations, even with friends, won't make other countries eager to do deals. Maybe Mr. Trump will claim victory and pull back if he wins some token concessions, but if a North American trade war persists, it will qualify as one of the dumbest in history. Now, that was on January 31st. On March 3rd, let's see what the Wall Street Journal had to say then. Trump takes the dumbest tariff plunge. Also, by the editorial board. President Trump likes to cite the stock market when it's rising as a sign of his policy success. So what does he think about Monday's plunge? The Dow Jones Industrial Average took a 650-point header after he announced he'll hit Mexico and Canada on Tuesday with 25% tariffs. Mr. Trump said at the White House there was, quote, no room left to negotiate with the two American trade treaty partners. Some of his smarter advisors have been hoping he'd start renegotiating the USMCA and delay the tariffs, but Mr. Trump wants tariffs for their own sake, which he says will usher in a new golden age. We've quartered Mr. Trump's ire by calling the Mexico and Canada levies the dumbest in history, and we may have understated the point. Again, the Wall Street Journal saying we may have understated the point. Mr. Trump is whacking friends, not adversaries. His taxes will hit every cross-border transaction, and the North American vehicle market is so interconnected that some cars cross a border as many as 8 times as they are assembled. Mr. Trump also objected when we reported an analysis by the Anderson Economic Group that the 25% tariff will raise the cost of a full-size SUV assembled in North America by $9,000 and a pickup truck by $8,000. And we all know that Trump voters in particular are particularly fond of pickup trucks. Is this how the new Republican Party plans on helping working class voters? Mr. Trump is volatile, and who knows how long he'll keep the tariffs in place. Retaliation that hits certain states and businesses may also cause him to reconsider sooner than he imagines. Investors are trying to read this uncertainty as they also watch growing evidence of a slowing U.S. economy. Unbridled tariff ban was always going to be a big economic risk in a second term, and here we are. Wow. That's the Wall Street Journal. Now, here's the thing, kids and cubs, because I asked you to put a pin in something, and the Wall Street Journal mentioned again stocks. Yesterday, the President of the United States had a big day because he was making a big address that lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes. I did not watch it. I read a summary. We did not miss much. But something did happen. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick had a few things to say yesterday, minutes after the U.S. stock market limped to a close for a second day of sharp declines, spurred at least in part by investors' fears that Trump aggressive policies will ignite a trade war, damaging trade war. They did not use the word damaging, but I do not like the C word, so I altered it here. This is from CNBC. President Donald Trump will probably announce tariff compromise deals with Canada and Mexico soon, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said Tuesday. The potential agreements would likely involve scaling back at least part of Trump's brand new 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada, he added. Lutnick's comments, as I mentioned, came minutes after the U.S. stock market limped to a close for a second day of sharp declines, spurred at least in part by investors' fears that Trump aggressive policies will ignite a damaging trade war. After his remarks, U.S. stock futures tied to all 3 majors averages rose. Funny that. Tariffs are coming, stock market drops. Tariffs are here, stock market drops. 2 days in a row, big drops. Well, there might be some compromise deals coming soon. Oh? Well, what do you know? There's a little uptick in the stock markets. The compromises with Canada and Mexico will likely be revealed as soon as today, Lutnick said on Fox Business. While the cabinet secretary did not specify what Trump would agree to, he suggested the U.S. president would be willing to meet Canada and Mexico in the middle. Quote, he also appeared to foreclose on the possibility that Trump would lift the tariffs entirely. The Trump administration on Tuesday reimposed sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports after putting them on pause for a month. Trump, who has held up tariffs as an all-powerful negotiating tool, based the policy on allegations that the neighboring countries were failing to stem the flow of drugs and crime into the United States. Quote, both the Mexicans and Canadians are on the phone with me all day today trying to show that they'll do better, Lutnick said Tuesday afternoon. On the list of things that never happened. That never happened. There are no officials from Canada or the United States going, listen, we'll still do better. No. They're all saying, listen, we've done everything any reasonable country could be expected to do, and then some. But you're not giving us any end goals, and you're doing this on purpose because the easier to move the goalposts, my child. So, yeah. There have not been people calling Howard Lutnick to say, just tell us how we can do better. There's a lot of people calling him to say, just tell us what the F you want. And specifically and precisely what we need to do to satisfy the guy who can't be satisfied, clearly. So, but nobody said, oh, just we'll be good. We'll do more if you'll just. That did not happen. Quote, and the president is listening because, he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. Okay. Lutnick described a deal in which Canada and Mexico agree, quote, to do more, at which point Trump would, quote, meet you in the middle some way. It's also precise. Quote, we're probably going to be announcing that tomorrow, he said. Lutnick said the announcement would not be another pause. The comments came hours before Trump was set to deliver a primetime address to a joint session of Congress. So there you go, kids and cubs. And I see that to close off the show, we have Grizzly. Hello, sir. How are you?
Well, sir, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit destroyed from last night. Thank you, James. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I woke up. I didn't get to bed until very late, and then I woke up in time to come home because I was at Bridget's place, and I'm like, oh no, that's not happening. I'm very nauseous. I don't drink that much wine on a weeknight, and I did last night. I did notice we have we're gonna get spanked because when you set up you put us on the Dean's Twitter feed, and we're not allowed to do that.
Yes, we are.
Since when? We are?
Yes, we are now.
Oh, okay. I was told we weren't, so this is news to me.
We are now. Yeah, we are now.
When did that change?
At the beginning of last week, I think.
Okay. Well, it's
yes.
So I can just keep adding that in every day then. All right.
Yes, we can now. Yep.
Good to know.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, I forgot to tell you that. I'm sorry about that.
I did not know.
Yes. From Dean himself. It's ready now, so we can do it. So
okay.
We got the go ahead. So yeah, kids and cubs, Mr. Grizzly, you pretty much arrived at the end of the show. I don't really have anything else.
No, it's fine. The moment. No biggie.
But it's always a joy to see you.
I got home a couple of minutes ago, and I had a quick cuddle with Lola, and now she's looking at me like, "Why aren't we going out? But like, why aren't we going? But what are you doing? But why are you going? Why are you doing the work thing?" So yeah, so I'm about to go take her out for a little walk, and apologies to everybody today, but last night was fun. It was a good time, and I am recovering. I maybe had, and I'm not joking when I say this, maybe 3 hours sleep. I do not stay up that late, even on the weekend, and I don't drink that much, even on the weekend. And last night I sort of violated two of my unwritten rules, if you will, and I have to pay the price for it today.
Everything moderation, including moderation, my friend.
Yeah, it was worth it. The one thing I did want to add in, though, that I was listening, I was on the train home, and the Polyev speech.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be kidding me!
I know.
Like, I watched it, and I'm like, oh my dear Lord!
This is not what the moment's calling for, buddy.
He cannot read a room. He can't. He has to be so partisan. He doesn't believe in bipartisanship. Team Canada? No, it's Team Pierre Poilievre. That's all it is. We can dive into it tomorrow. We can look at some video on that. But yeah, I just wanted to jump in for a few minutes at the end of the show to say hello. How's it going? Sorry I wasn't here today, and I will see you tomorrow.
Hey, self-care. Self-care. Oh, could have been the whiskey. Might have been the gin. I should have known. James, you're such a bad influence. I'm glad you had some time together. It's always good when friends get some time spent together. All right, kits and cubs. I think that's it at the moment for today. So that's the end of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us, because we liked making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring, and word of mouth is priceless. So please, please, please tell your peeps and poops all about us. We very much appreciate it when you do. Now, if you would like to not miss an episode, especially in podcast version, you don't have to. Thanks to the Ray Girl, who sponsors our pod page. If you look at that QR code that just appeared there, like magic. If you scan it, that'll bring you there. And if you're listening, it's podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver with a hyphen between each one of those words. And if you go there and click subscribe, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. You don't have to worry about a thing. We do all the work. Now, if you'd like to help us in other ways, kits and cubs, that QR code that should have appeared by my head. I don't know. I can't see it on my screen right now because there's a big live sign that would be in front of it, but hopefully it is there. We'll bring you to our YouTube page, and we invite you to surf on down there to where Kit Elaine and Kit Cassie will meet you and encourage you to, click with our buttons, or smash with them, I should say. Like, share, and subscribe. They are waiting for you. We hope that you do that. And there it goes. Now it's appeared. I was wondering why it wasn't appearing. It was showing me that it was showing, but it did not. So there you go. But now it's up. So yeah, give it a little click, give it a little scan, click our buttons. That gets us some happy. We love getting some happy, and it helps us a lot with the algorithm. Thank you very much. And our most recent advertising push seems to be doing well. We're up to 13,300 subscribers. So we've had a few join us over the last little bit. And we appreciate all of you who have sampled our wares and have decided that we are worth you joining. Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Now, if kits and cubs, you would like to support us in other ways, because we do incur some financial costs in order to bring the show to you, then the QR code that has just appeared will bring you to the Beaver Lodge's Emergency Hydration Fund, as we affectionately call it, but it's our tip jar, really. So if you go to coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word, and there you can make a little contribution, because our tip jar will be there. We appreciate everything that you're able to donate. We have some internet fees and subscription fees to various services and all that type of stuff to bring the show to you. So any help that you can offer us is obviously welcome and appreciated. And also, whatever's left over, of course, does go to keeping your favorite beaver moist. Because what is a beaver without moisture? Anyway, we beavers, we love to swim. So keep me hydrated, kits and cubs. And hopefully I'll be able to get off this scratchiness in my voice. I don't know what, I had a 2-day cold a bit last week, but for some reason, this whispering or raspiness in the voice has remained, which is kind of interesting. It's great when I'm singing the blues at home, but a little weird when I'm speaking to you, especially when I go into my lower, softer register. Sometimes my voice just disappears. But hey, that's life. We'll deal with it. Let's see, that's coffee. Because democracy is something that you do, kits and cubs. There's the Quebec Liberal leadership race. There's the federal Liberal leadership race. There must be something wrong with my thing, because from what I can tell at the moment, I've used all their services and they seem to have no record of me. So I had to write in personally and say, based on my browser history, this is the date on which I registered, and it was 5 days before the end. You really should have me. But right now, so far, there seems to be no record of me, which is really interesting. Don't know if that's happened to any other people, but hopefully I started looking into it early enough for them to be able to track my registration and include me on the list, because that would be very weird. Um, but yeah, do vote in that. And of course, there are by-elections coming up in Halifax and provincial by-election in Manitoba coming. So please find out what you need to do for that. Also, kids and cubs, if you want to write a letter to the CBC Ombudsman, as we encourage you to do, to let them know what type of programming you expect from the CBC. That would be very, very good to do. And as well, inspired by our guest the other day. I don't know if you know, kids and cubs, but there is a tax credit for Canadians that buy a subscription to news of any kind. So, if there is some local news in your community that is doing good work and you wish to support, if you have a few dollars, do subscribe. Get a digital subscription to the platform, keep your receipt, and write it off, declare it on your taxes. There is something for that. So that's a good way that you can support local media. Okay. Um, Words of wisdom. Well, you know what? I guess make those my words of wisdom, actually. You need to be well informed. So support local media. Find, if you have the budget, find one that you can support, and please register for it, and then enjoy your tax credit for supporting digital media. If you are looking for it, there is. I tried to include the link yesterday, but the link is too long to include in the YouTube chat. But if you do look at um, digital, I think digital subscription tax credit, there's on the Government of Canada, there's a page that has a list of all the outlets that qualify, I believe, so that you can look it up and make sure that you do get your tax credit. So there you go. And support local journalism in the process. Very important. All right, kids and cubs, it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And I will try to stick the landing on the credits and hopefully come back to you with a little bit of an Easter egg. So let's see if we can do this the right way. I just have to go and find my instructions to make sure I do it right. All right, let's see. Guess means I go here. All right. Let's see if I cue the cock in the right way. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right, kids and cubs, a little bit of Canadians who make us proud at the World Nordic Ski Championships. They had the Team Sprint Classic Relay, 6 times 1.4 kilometers, and Team Canada for the men scored a top 10, finishing 9th, which is a good result for our team. Very happy there. And for the women, also a top 10, finishing in 10th place. So that's very good as well. So glad for our competitors who are making us very proud over there as well, kids and cubs. Michael Kingsbury, who we talk about a lot on the show, who was one of the has the highest winning percentages in their sport, won his 97th and 98th Moguls World Cup titles. So he's getting close to 100 World Cup victories there. And I believe that he has already secured the Crystal Globe. Yes, his 28th career Crystal Globe. And you get the Crystal Globe for winning the entire season. So at an event in Almaty, Kazakhstan, in both individual and dual moguls, he won and secured his 28th Crystal Globe across all disciplines and 13th Crystal Globe for the overall standings, all categories and events combined. So very, very impressive from him in that event. There were 3 podiums at that event. Sorry, my bad. I misread another paragraph. There were 3 medals in Gudari, Georgia, the country of Georgia. In ski cross, Reese Howden got gold, and it's his 4th win of the season and 15th career victory in his event, which is very good for him. And Courtney Hoffus added to the Canadian success with a bronze medal in the women's event. It's her 2nd podium finish of the season. India Sherritt also found the podium, taking 3rd place, and that moved Sherritt into the top spot in the race for the Crystal Globe over her teammate Marielle Thompson. So right now Canada is 1 and 2 in the race for the Crystal Globe in women's ski cross. It was her 6th podium of the season and the 11th of her career. In long track skating, at the final leg of the World Cup, Team Canada skaters collected a pair of silver medals. Laurent Dubreuil and Ivani Blondin both got the medals there. So that was good. I believe Dubreuil was in the 500 meters and Blondin was in the women's mass start. So that was good. It was a photo finish in her race, so it was a silver by not much. In snowboard cross, Elliot Grondin reached the podium at an event in Turkey with a 2nd place finish in the final, and he has a 130-point lead over his closest competitor in the overall standings. So great performances by our athletes, making us proud all around the world. Of course, again, if you're in Canada, the Briar is on. We're seeing some absolutely exceptional curling. So hurry hard. All right, everyone. That's all I got for you today. Hopefully, you will have a most beaverific day. We'll see you soon. Bye.